Hi, and welcome. I am so glad that you're here. This course was created specifically for those of you who are navigating the uncertainty, frustration, and overwhelm that often comes with mold and mycotoxin illness. Maybe you suspect mold is making you sick, but you haven't been able to confirm that yet. Maybe you're experiencing a wide range of mysterious symptoms like brain fog, fatigue, rashes, anxiety, headaches, and no one's able to tell you why. Or maybe you know mold is the issue, but you're feeling stuck because you can't work directly with a provider right now, whether that's due to time or finances or access. And no matter where you are in this journey, this course is here to help you take empowered steps forward. Together, we'll explore how to identify whether mold may be contributing to your health issues, what testing options are available, and the pros and cons of each of those, and most importantly, the foundational protocols and healing steps to begin supporting your body through mold and mycotoxin recovery. My goal is to help you feel more informed, supported, and confident as you move through the process of healing, because I know firsthand how confusing and lonely it really can be. Let's get started. First, I want to tell you a little bit about me. I started my journey in 2009 as an undergrad with the intention of going to medical school. I became a certified nursing assistant and worked at the hospital, where I became disillusioned by the medical system. I pivoted then into holistic modalities, where I fell in love with traditional Chinese medicine. From there, I got my master's in traditional Chinese medicine, had multiple externships, additional trainings, and eventually got my licensure. The practice just grew so quickly. We brought on multiple providers and I took on more of a clinical director role. And then I had an amazing opportunity to work part-time at Mayo Clinic's Integrative Medicine Department. So to say that I was busy is an understatement. I was incredibly busy to the point of burnout. At that point, I scaled back into a single provider model. I ended up growing my family. And from there, I switched into telehealth, rebranded the practice into what it is today, Balanced Healing with Julianne. This is our first course and the course that I am so passionate and excited to share with you because the need for this information is growing exponentially. So let's get into it. Topics that we are going to be discussing within this course are understanding mold and mycotoxin illness, why mold and mycotoxin illness is often overlooked or misdiagnosed, signs and symptoms of mold and mycotoxin illness, labs and testing methods, how genetics can play a role, how to order labs, the relationship between histamines, hormones, and mold, understanding the basics of liver detoxification, an antioxidant overview, binders and mineral and the connections with detox, why some people get sick and others don't, steps upon exposure, foundations of healing from mycotoxin and mold illness, a nervous system regulation conversation, a discussion on supplements and protocols, and then a bonus interview with one of the leading mold inspection companies in the Southeast region, and a bonus interview on inspection FAQs. All right, mycotoxin and mold illness, what's making you ill? So I'm gonna just start on a very foundational level in case you are super brand new to this. Mold is a fungus that obviously grows in damp environments, right? And it spreads by releasing spores, which can go airborne and they can also land on surfaces. Mold can cause illness, specifically irritation, asthma in the sinuses, runny nose, congestion. Think of more of like allergic symptoms, right? Especially in individuals that are super sensitive, but really anyone. Mycotoxins are toxic byproducts of mold. A lot of times people will say like, oh, I have a little bit of mold in my home, but it's not black mold, so it's not causing my health issues. Black mold, I swear, has the best PR firm, okay? Everyone thinks black mold is the most toxic mold. Black mold is a toxic mold. It is not the only toxic mold. There are incredibly toxic molds, what we call zero tolerance mold, meaning you really should not come in any contact with them. So as you could see, black mold is a problem. It's not the only problem. If you have any mold, we need to be taking it seriously. Additional molds that are not considered zero tolerance molds still could be detrimental to your health, especially if they're producing mycotoxins. People ask me all the time, why is it that no one is talking about mold illness? Or my doctor, I bring it up to them and they have no idea. It's not taught in the traditional medical school. In fact, it wasn't even taught in my medical program. Most people that specialize in mold and mycotoxin illness do so through continuing education. They either have a loved one that went through this, they saw patients go through this and they took a special interest, or it happened to them. It's not being taught in the way that it should be. If you ask your doctor, they'll say, oh, you might get like a little rhinitis, a little congestion, a little sinusitis, maybe an allergy symptom, maybe you're allergic to it. They're not looking at it from a systemic point of view of how this can cascade and really be extremely detrimental to the entire body, all of its systems, and ultimately the person as a whole. I would argue that one of the most complicated parts of identifying mold illness is that symptoms mimic other conditions and disorders. So for example, extreme anxiety, panic attacks, changes in mood, irritability, and inability to handle stress. You may not think mold unless you're in this field, right? You might just say, are you under a lot of stress lately? Maybe it's your hormones. Maybe you just need to go on an SSRI. Maybe you just need to take a vacation. Maybe it's mold. So that's why it's complicated. You could have bloating and someone might say, well, maybe it's SIBO. Maybe it is, but maybe it's mold. It's very hard to pinpoint if you're not in this realm of education. So that's why your PCP, your primary doctor, has not been able to help you identify this because it can mimic so many other symptoms. Mold and mycotoxins can be very immunosuppressive. So when your immune system is being suppressed by these mycotoxins, it allows for other pathogens to come in. So, you're always going to come in contact with some yeast, some bacteria. Your body should be able to handle it. It's what we're designed to do, right? We're not a sterile specimen. We come in contact with things in the world and we should be able to handle those things. If we cannot, there are reasons why. Mold sets the stage where we can't handle those things. So then we can get a dysbiotic overgrowth, a yeast overgrowth, all these other issues, because mold has allowed for this immunosuppressive state to take over where you're not able to have that same fight response that you would have before. So oftentimes what we see with mold illness is we'll have mold illness plus a yeast overgrowth, mold illness plus SIBO, mold illness plus a dysbiosis, mold illness plus a hormone imbalance. We'll get into all of that in further slides. But if we are going to be addressing things, we address mold first, remove that immunosuppressive layer, right? Give the body a little bit of a revival, and then your immune system should be able to start knocking the rest of the stuff out. Sometimes it needs supports, additional protocols, other times it doesn't, because your body's designed to heal. Mold also can dysregulate the nervous system, and this is going to be a huge topic later on in the course, and I would argue the most important topic. Additionally, there's some belief that mold can colonize in the body. This is controversial. There is limited data that shows that it actually can. There is some scientific literature that shows it can colonize in the sinus cavities, in the nose, in the gut. It's very debatable as to how common that actually is. So a traditional doctor is going to say it's extremely rare and really never happens and they never see it. I would argue that they don't see it because they don't really treat molds. So there is some debate there around how common this is, but scientific literature does confirm that it can colonize. Inhalation is often talked about as the most common exposure for mold and mycotoxins. However, it could be ingested, which is a very common exposure. It can also be absorbed through the skin. Let's talk signs and symptoms of mold and mycotoxin illness. And when I tell you almost anything could be a sign and symptom, I mean almost anything. If you take a look at your slide, we're talking neurological and cognitive issues. So this could be feeling dizzy, having eye tracking issues. You look this way and it takes a moment for your eyes to track over. This could be brain fog, lethargy, an inability to think of a word. It almost feels like it's just slow to come or it's not there anymore. We can have poor concentration, lightheadedness, vertigo, visual disturbances, which we touched on a little, but also like eye floaters or things like that. We can have numbness and tingling, mood swings, anxiety, depression, migraines, and headaches are often very common as well. We can have difficulty sleeping, so whether that's insomnia, difficulty staying asleep, frequent night urination is very common with mold. We can have frequent colds, lowered immune function, chronic sinus issues, chronic sinus infections, shortness of breath, a persistent cough, and then we can also have autoimmunity symptoms. joint pain, temperature dysregulation issues, so feeling like you're unable to regulate your temperature, rashes, chemical sensitivities. All of a sudden now we are sensitive to foods that we never used to be. Weight changes, bloating, changes in bowels, you name it, it could be a symptom of mold, and that is why mold is so hard. We really need to rely on clinical discernment and the labs, even though those labs are imperfect. It really helps us kind of piece together the best possible scenario for us to move forward with an explanation. Let's get into talking about those labs. So when it comes to testing for mycotoxins, we have a few options. Our most common option is going to be a mycotoxin urine test. This is my preferred way to test. Everyone in this industry, in the mold world, has a different opinion. This is what I have seen to be the best option for patients. It could be done at home, so the test kit gets mailed to their house. They do the urine sample, they mail it back, and it comes back with a pretty comprehensive lab, which we are going to go over a sample report together so you can see what that looks like. The three most common labs that do this are Mosaic, they used to be called Great Plains, Vibrant Wellness, and Real Time. Mosaic is my go-to. Vibrant Wellness is also phenomenal. Those are really the two that I use. Other options are immunoglobulin testing, a VCS visual test, inflammatory markers, some genetic testing, Marcon's testing, and OAT testing, organic acid testing. We will go into all of that. Mycotoxin urine testing is tricky for many reasons. One, the test is designed to measure the presence of mycotoxins in the urine. Whether that mycotoxin is coming from an environmental exposure or from food, we can't tell. There's no lab that's going to be able to differentiate that information. So is it possible that you have elevated mycotoxins because you eat a lot of moldy food? Yeah, it's possible. And moldy foods are aged cheeses, peanuts, dairy, dried fruit and nuts, dried meat, alcohol, wheat, corn, grain, those tend to be very moldy. So if you're predominantly living on peanut butter sandwiches, then yeah, you probably have some very elevated ochratoxin A. However, if your diet does not consist of predominantly those foods, then we could probably use clinical discernment to really say, okay, this is most likely environmental, and we'll go through that with a sample lab. The concerns are that this test, well, there's a lot of concerns. First of all, none of these tests to test for mycotoxins are FDA approved. It's very frustrating that we in 2025 do not have an FDA approved lab to test for mycotoxins to really understand the full picture of the mold burden on the body or the mycotoxin burden on the body for patients. This test is not going to be quantitative. So we can't say, oh, I'm really high in mold, therefore I have a really big mold problem. That's not necessarily the case, because you might have some mold in the elevated ranges, and that might look like a small problem, but it could be that the mold shut down your detox pathways so much that you can't pee out the mycotoxin. And so this test is not looking at quantitative data, this is just looking to see qualitative data. Is it there? How can we use clinical discernment to make sense of this? Let's go into a sample report. This sample report is from Mosaic Diagnostics. Like I said, my preferred lab, Mosaic and Vibrant Wellness, top tier labs in my opinion. This is a sample report, and you could see here, this patient here has several elevated mycotoxins, right? We've got some gliotox, we have some mycophenolic acid, we have some ochratoxin A. All of these are going to impact the body differently. On the opposite side of this screen, you could see how these molds impact the body. So for example, gliotox and ochratoxin A are neurotoxic. We can also see ochratoxin A on this report was elevated. It's carcinogenic. It causes oxidative stress. Mycophenolic, you could see in the immunotoxicity category, causes immunotoxicity or immune suppression. These mycotoxins really impact the body in different ways depending on what mycotoxin it is. It's going to impact the body differently. Here's an example from the report. This patient had elevated levels of mycophenolic acid. Mycophenolic acid, like we mentioned before, it's pretty immunosuppressive. It's actually very immunosuppressive. It's commonly found, as you could see here, through environmental exposures in moldy foods, as well as water damaged buildings. If we see a mycophenolic acid off the charts, we need to be looking at exposure sources. Is there water damage in the home? Has there been bubbling on the ceiling, a leak that maybe went unnoticed, an odor, a smell, dampness, humidity levels? We need to start investigating the environment. The next slide, you could see it's a snapshot of all these different mycotoxins. It tells you the species, the sources, and the potential toxicity. So it's a really good overview. This lab does a great job presenting this data once you get your lab results back. Sometimes I'll get people comment on my post saying mold is not toxic, mycotoxins are not toxic, and these people are crazy, right? Let's point them to this slide then. Mycotoxins and their use in pharmacological drugs. You could see here, we talked a little bit about mycophenolic acid. So mycophenolic acid is actually a mycotoxin that's used in the prescription medicine world. We have two predominant prescriptions that are really just mycophenolic acid used for suppression in the treatment of organ transplants, so the body doesn't reject the new organ, as well as in autoimmune diseases. So when people say, oh, mycotoxins can't suppress immune function, well, then why are we using that in the pharmaceutical world to do exactly that? So clearly, there's a disconnect. Some people just don't understand the science. You could see the mechanisms of actions and how this works. The resulting effects is the mycophenolic acid reduces the activation and replication of T and B cells, decreases antibody production, and limits immune-mediated tissue damage, which is why it's used in autoimmune conditions. All right, let's get into other forms of testing. So we could do antibody testing, which is going to be probably covered by insurance, the cheapest way. You can ask your PCP for it. Immunoglobulin testing is a blood test. It's super affordable. You can ask your PCP for it. Once again, it's not differentiating was your exposure from food or from the environment. There is no mold test currently that can differentiate that. All we know is, do we have an immunoresponse in the body? Are we mounting some form of response? Are we urinating out some mycotoxins, or are we mounting, in this case, an immunoglobulin response? A snapshot to understanding immunoglobulins. So your IgMs, think of these as the Marines, right? IgM, M for marine. These Marines, they're the first to show up. They're going to be the first to mount a response, followed by your IgG, more of a systemic response, and your IgA, an immune activity, mostly in mucous membranes like the lungs, the nose, and the gut. We then have our IgE, which is an allergy response. I actually had a patient last week who is going through suspected mold issues. She asked her PCP for immunoglobulin testing, and she sent me the results and said, I don't have mold, my IgE was negative. And I sent her this study and I said, that was not the right test to order, and this is why. A PubMed study showed that the least reliable way to test immunoglobulins for mold was through an IgE. Surprisingly, the most reliable way was an IgG blood test for immunoglobulins for mold. So if we're going to use blood testing, antibody testing to look for mold, it's going to be an IgG. You can see this study in full at the bottom of our slide and look it up. You can read it. It's super interesting. What we anticipated was to see an elevation of the IgEs. That was not the case in the study. We saw an elevation of IgGs more so than anything, followed by IgA. The IgM was moderately reliable. The IgE was not reliable at all. So very interesting. If you are going to do antibody testing, then you can ask your PCP to order you an IgG. Like I said, I am partial to the mycotoxin urine testing personally. Okay, next we have what's called a visual contrast sensitivity test, a VCS test. This test is looking to see your neurological function by measuring your ability to distinguish shades of gray. Sounds crazy, I know, but your ability to distinguish shades of gray can be impacted by mycotoxins and mold. The reason I like this test is because it's free, takes almost no time, you could do it from home. The reason I don't like this test is because it is incredibly not user-friendly. I can't figure it out. I'm not tech savvy. I would argue most people, maybe half the population's not tech savvy like me. You have to be a certain distance from the screen. You have to match up the visuals and the brightness. You have to calibrate it. I couldn't calibrate it to save my life. The results will not be diagnostic. I think that we're probably catching on to a theme here, right? None of these are diagnostic. None of these are definitive. They piece together a puzzle. Can this be part of your puzzle? Absolutely. Is this going to be your only puzzle piece? No, it's not going to be. So if you want to do this test, like I said, it's free online, go for it. It's just going to show if you have an elevation, then there could be a mold issue going on. In addition, we can look at inflammatory markers via blood work. That's something your PCP can order. It's something you could self-order. Things like SED rate, C-reactive protein. These are not telling us if you have mold. These are telling us if you have elevated inflammation systemically in the body. And so could that inflammation be from mold? Absolutely. Could it be from something else like an autoimmune condition? Absolutely. Is that autoimmune condition rooted in mold? Maybe, maybe not. And that's once again why this is so tricky. Let's get into genetic testing. This is a hot topic. I have a lot of patients who are obsessed with their MTHFR gene mutation status. And I always tell patients, just because you have an MTHFR gene mutation does not mean that you're struggling. Your body may handle that mutation really well. It may not, but it may. So just because you have a mutation does not mean you need to do all these extra things, right? It means there's a potential for needing additional support. Same thing with the HLA-DR variants. If you had that variant, there's a potential for needed support. Going into MTHFR specifically, there are two specific variants that we most commonly see. If you have an elevation in either of these, you'll have a partial mutation. If you are mutated in both, you'll have a higher chance of needing additional support. The cat has joined the chat. He was being very disruptive, so I'm hoping he's better behaved on my lap. If we are MTHFR gene mutated, then it's going to potentially mean our ability to process folate is going to be potentially declined. So these mutations can slow down the MTHFR enzyme, which means they can reduce our ability to process folate effectively, methylate, which is a very important detox pathway process, clear toxins, including mycotoxins, effectively. If you have an MTHFR gene mutation, you may have impaired detox pathways, but not always. So like I said, this is not a life sentence. If you have this, it doesn't mean that you are going to be impaired. It means you might be impaired. You may need additional support, and that support would look like methylfolate. It could be a methylcobalamin, some B6, some riboflavin, maybe some magnesium as cofactors. MTHFR gene mutations do not cause illness directly. They can reduce your ability to methylate and detox, especially when we're under stress or toxin exposure, or if we have nutrient deficiencies, which then could cause issues. Ways to really understand if your gene mutation is a problem: first of all, get your MTHFR gene checked. You could do that through life extensions. We'll talk about how to order labs shortly. And then, or say you're positive, instead of just assuming we have a problem now, we're going to go ahead and run additional labs like a B12, a folate, and a homocysteine. If those levels are optimal, your MTHFR gene mutation is being managed by your body. Your body has got it. She's figured it out. She's doing a great job managing it. If you have a gene mutation and your homocysteine is elevated, it's like a 15, your B12 is like a 200, really low, clearly the body's struggling a little bit. So then that's when we'll get on something like a homocysteine nutrient, some B12, maybe some folinic acid. So if you have an MTHFR gene mutation, you really want to be careful about your folic acid consumption. I would argue no one should be consuming folic acid. It is synthetic. It is not the same thing as folate. It is not the same thing as folonic. So you really do want to be careful with that. That's going to clog up this pathway and is going to make everything a little bit more challenging, specifically if you are mutated. Now let's talk about the HAL-DR variant. HLA-DR specifically is going to help your body recognize and respond to foreign substances like bacteria, viruses, toxins as part of your body's immune system. If we have a variant, we're going to potentially be less able to eliminate biotoxins like molds, even recognize the mold in the body. We're going to be more prone to chronic inflammation even after the exposure is gone. Individuals with these variants, same thing with MTHFR. It's not a direct cause of a problem. It's a potential that you need more support. You potentially need more support if you have an HLA-DR variant or an MTHFR gene mutation. The way that we would support someone with an HLA-DR variant would be to optimize liver detox pathways, to bind out toxins if exposed, to really work on reducing inflammation through diet, lifestyle, nervous system work, increasing our omegas, and making sure we're getting enough antioxidants. And we'll continue to talk about that through this course. Next up, we have our MARCONS testing. MARCONS stands for multiple antibiotic resistant coagulase negative staph. So if we have this, we may have a lot of different symptoms like chronic sinusitis, chronic congestion, chronic inflammation in the sinuses, chronic sinus infections. What we could do is a nasal swab to check for MARCoNS. MARCoNS are frequently found in individuals with mold-related illness, specifically those who experience nasal symptoms. However, sometimes we can have incidental findings where we don't have nasal symptoms and we go to swab and then we do test positive for MARCoNS. So you don't just treat it point blank. You really need to make sure we're symptomatic. If there's a problem, then we treat it. Otherwise, we assume the body is managing it. Treatments may include prescription compounds or alternative solutions like a xylitol-based nasal spray, saline rinses, and things of that nature. Last but not least is our organic acid testing, my least favorite lab to ever exist. Organic acid testing is looking at metabolic function on a cellular level, and it gives us insight on things like mitochondrial health, oxidative stress, detoxification, inflammation. So why is it my least favorite lab? That's a great question. It's my least favorite lab because it is so hard to differentiate why things are elevated or why things are low. So for example, we can have an elevation in a gut marker that could be due to an exposure of Mycotoxin A. Mold. So someone might run this lab and say, oh, I have this elevation, so I have mold. Maybe. You also might have a dysbiosis. You also might have a yeast overgrowth. You also might have just ate a lot of carbohydrates. A colleague once said that organic acid testing is like the Einstein of labs. It tells you a little bit about everything and a lot about nothing all at once. And I feel like that is very true. It gives us so much information, and then you have to use that information to then order many other labs to confirm that information because it's all across the board. Let's talk about how we order our labs. So if you're not working with a provider, there are ways to self-order labs. One platform is called Rupa. You can go in without a physician and you can order your mycotoxin urine test, your immunoglobulins, your MTHFR gene mutation, your inflammatory markers. If you wanted to order an organic acid test, you could do it there too. They assign a provider to that lab, and then you could schedule like a consult to help interpret the results. The other option is through Life Extension. Life Extension is a nonprofit organization where they try to make access to labs really available as well as research, and they do not take money, supposedly, hopefully, from pharmaceutical companies. They're supposedly independently driven. They put out a lot of really incredible research. You can order specifically the HLA-DR lab. So if you wanted to order that genetic testing, you could do that through them, and then you could set up a phone consult for free to discuss the results because the genetic labs are a little bit hard to interpret if you're not familiar with them. MARCoNS testing can be ordered directly through Microbiology Diagnostics, and then the VSC testing can be done online through the vsctest.com. Mold impacts the body from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective that's going to be a little bit different than a traditional Western medicine perspective. In traditional Chinese medicine, mold impacts the liver by stagnating it. So the liver governs detox. It manages the free flow of qi, which is the body's energy, and blood. The eyes are also the window to the liver in Chinese medicine. So when we have visual disturbances, eye floaters, difficulty with eye tracking, dizziness, sometimes we look to the liver to understand that pathology. Symptoms most commonly associated to liver stagnation are going to be emotional instability, feeling easily agitated, like a trigger switch, like any little thing could trigger you, an inability to handle stress, anxiety, insomnia, like we mentioned, those eye floaters, changes in vision, headaches, hives, chemical sensitivities, dizziness, vertigo, and so on. Dampness is also a very common pattern differential in Chinese medicine that we see with mold. Mostly impacts the spleen and stomach organs, lungs, and the large intestine. Symptoms of a damp accumulation in Chinese medicine are going to be associated to brain fog, fatigue, lethargy, bloating, craving for sugar, heaviness, poor memory recall, difficulty with words, changes in bowels, itching, whether that's vaginal, anal, or skin rashes. Which gets us into our mast cell connection. So mast cells, histamine, and mycotoxin and mold illness. I feel like sometimes people stumble upon mold via histamine. They think they have a histamine issue, and then through their research, they realize their histamine issue is actually from a mold issue. This is the connection. Mast cells are immune cells found in the tissues like skin, lungs, and gut, and they help defend the body by releasing chemicals, most notably as histamine, in response to stressors like allergens or toxins. Histamine is a compound that increases blood flow, it triggers inflammation, and activates other immune cells. And while it's essential for immune defense, too much of it, or the inability to break it down can cause allergy-like symptoms and an array of other symptoms as well. Mold toxins can trigger mast cells to release histamine and interfere with the enzymes that break it down, leading to histamine buildup, aka histamine intolerance. There are some things that are really supportive. Quercetin, vitamin C, Dow enzyme, stinging nettle, bromelain, they can help break down excess histamine and stabilize mast cells. Mold exposure can also activate what's called the cell danger response, which is an ongoing theory. This is not proven. This is a very common theory in this line of work. This is a defense mode that slows the normal body functions down to protect itself against harm. I like to think of our cells going into little bunkers and just bunkering down. So what happens when you're in a private little secure bunker? Cellular communication's not happening. You can't talk to your neighbor if you're in a cement bunker, right? The cellular cleanup that happens, not happening. Everyone's on lockdown. Inflammation goes up, immune regulation goes down. So when we're in this place, we can get increased inflammation, worsening histamine responses, and overall, we can have this vicious cycle where we can't get out of this cell danger response unless we're being diligent about our nervous system regulation, which is going to come up shortly. There's also this concept of the histamine bucket. Whether you've heard this term or not, you can visualize we all have a bucket inside of us, right? And as we eat certain foods that contain histamine or produce histamine, it slowly fills up the bucket. Maybe we have some bacteria in our gut that generates some histamine. Maybe our ability to break down histamine is slow, so our bucket's rising. Then you have a mold or mycotoxin exposure. Now we have so much more histamine, right? Once that bucket overflows, that's when we get symptoms. This is also why it's very hard to pinpoint whether or not we have a true allergy to something or a true intolerance to something. Because, for example, you can eat a strawberry today and you feel fine, but if you eat it tonight, you might have a reaction. You might get hives, you might get a runny nose, you might get a headache. And that's because your histamine bucket overflowed at that point. That was the cherry on top or the strawberry on top that just did it. It just puts you under. And so we do need to support our histamines if our histamines are becoming a problem with mold, which happens with many people, but not all people. How histamine is broken down. So once the histamine is released, the body has to break it down to prevent overload. Like I said, to prevent that bucket from overflowing. This happens through two main enzyme pathways, the Dow enzyme, HNMT, and through other pathways, specifically liver enzymes, will also help break this down. How mold and mycotoxins interfere with histamine breakdown. We now know that mold can increase our histamine in several ways. It could trigger our mast cells to dump extra histamine. It inhibits Dow enzyme production, specifically in the gut. Don't forget, Dow enzyme helps break down histamine. Fun fact, I learned this from Dr. Ben Lynch. Histamine is a big reason why people get motion sickness. It's not the only reason, but it's a big reason. And pigs don't get motion sickness because they have so much Dow enzyme in their body. In fact, almost all the Dow enzyme in production as a supplement is coming from pigs. Mold will also disrupt liver detox pathways, which we have talked about a good bit so far, slowing down the breakdown of those histamine metabolites. It activates that cell danger response, which we just spoke on, shifting that body into fight or flight, increasing reactivity and inflammation. We're going to go into that a little bit more. Mycotoxins, specifically like ochratoxin A, also damage the gut lining where most of the Dow enzyme is produced, worsening a histamine intolerance. So who's at risk for histamine clearance issues? People with gut inflammation, whether that's leaky gut, IBD, IBS, SIBO, mold-related dysbiosis, those with low Dow levels to begin with, people with genetic mutations or variants, mold-sensitive individuals, people who are under chronic stress, which depletes enzyme production. How we support histamine breakdown is going to be through nutrition predominantly. So we're going to support Dow by giving it the necessary cofactors, vitamin B6, copper, zinc, vitamin C to help stabilize mast cells and boost our Dow. We can also enhance methylation, so B12, folinic, B2, magnesiums, obviously reduce excess stress, alcohol, synthetic estrogens. So think of things like plastic. That's going to be really detrimental. And then our Dow enzyme supplements, you could take those before a meal. So if you know you always flush when you eat strawberries and it's specific to histamine, it's not a true allergy, you could take Dow enzyme to help with that. There are other foods that will also be high in histamine. As you could see on this next slide, aged cheeses and meats, fermented foods. So even though fermented foods are so good for us, if we have a histamine problem, it's not going to be your best friend to be eating highly fermented foods. They're going to be very high in histamine. So avoid the kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha until we get things in check. Alcohol, leftovers, those are also going to be foods very high in histamine. We have histamine releasing foods. That's going to be citrus, pineapple, strawberries, rhubarb, avocado, bananas, kiwis, papaya, as well as chocolate and coffee, and then things like tomatoes, eggplants, spinach, and pumpkin, to name a few. I want to caution you on food avoidances and diet limitations. I see patients all the time, they come to me and they are so afraid to eat because they don't know what's triggering them, and they just get so incredibly restrictive. And now we're dealing with even more nutrient deficiencies, which is exacerbating so many other problems. So unless you truly cannot eat these foods, don't just be willy-nilly cutting everything out of your diet, okay? And I can be a testament to this. When I had severe mold illness, I became anaphylaxis to almost everything I ate. I had an EpiPen for the first time in my life. I got down to like 5 safe foods. And I was able to work myself out of that, but I didn't have a choice because of how severe my reactions were. But if you do have a choice, don't just willy-nilly cut out every food. That's not going to be the solution to you getting through this problem. We need to find the root cause. And that root cause, like we said, could be the molds. It could be your liver stagnation pathways, your liver pathways are stagnated. You don't have the nutrition or cofactors that we need. So we have to get to root cause. You can't just be working on the symptoms. That's not going to be sustainable long term. As we know, mold also can disrupt hormones. Mold and mycotoxins stimulate a chronic stress response via the HPA axis, which then leads to a cortisol imbalance. So either super high or super low, depending on if this is acute or if this has been going on for a very long time. Mycotoxins can impair thyroid receptor sensitivity, so that T4 to T3 conversion, and contribute to autoimmune thyroid disease. So if anyone comes at you and says there's no way that mold can cause any hormone imbalance, you just point them to these studies. Mycotoxins act as xenoestrogens. As we know, estrogens in excess can become problematic. It can burden the liver, reduce estrogen clearance, and lead to what's called estrogen dominance, where we have too much estrogen or an inability to get the estrogen out. Chronic mold stress alters cortisol as well as leptin and blood glucose regulation. So mold and mycotoxins impact the body and impact really everyone differently, whether it's looking at your blood sugars, whether it's your thyroid, whether it's liver and estrogen, it can really impact everyone differently. Long-term mold exposure may suppress pituitary signaling as well, which can impact multiple things: ACTH, TSH, and sex hormone production. This is the million-dollar question I always get asked. Why do some people get sick and others don't? And this is often a point of contention in family dynamics. I can have a family of 4. One person is extremely ill. They're now seeking my help. And the other 3 people in the family are not sick, and therefore no one believes them. They think, you're crazy. You just have anxiety. You're just stressed. They are what we call the canary in the coal mine. So if you are not familiar with this, when we used to go down into the coal mines without having appropriate technology, we would bring a canary with us. That bird is going to feel it before everyone else feels it. And that bird is going to get sick and or die. And so essentially when people are the canary in the coal mine, they get sick before anyone else. It doesn't mean they're crazy. It just means that their body is a little bit more sensitive or a little bit more reactive than someone else. Genetics can play a role with this, but not always. Nervous system plays a big role with this sometimes, as well as baseline health, time of exposure, toxin load. There's lots of different reasons. Also, statistically, women are going to be more impacted than men. Would love to see some studies on that. So what do we do if we fall into the category of, I think I have mold, I think I have mycotoxin illness? We're going to look into testing. Like I said, the mycotoxin urine test is my preferred method. You could do a combination of the ones that we discussed. We're going to consider an inspection in our environment, or whether that's our home environment or our work environment. And we're going to start immediately with nervous system regulation. And we're going to talk more on this soon. If we fall into the category of, oh, I know I'm being exposed, then we need to figure out where is the exposure. You know you had a leak and that's where it's coming from. We need to remediate that. We absolutely have to get a grip on the environmental factor. We then need to start nervous system regulation ASAP, clean up lifestyle, vegan principles of protocols. People ask me all the time, can I heal if I'm living in mold? And the short answer is no. So whether you are trapped in a lease, you got to get out. You've got to get out. If you can't remediate, if you can't fix the environment you're in, you have to leave it. I like to equate this to if you are in your bathroom and a pipe bursts through the wall and there's water flooding and you get a mop and you start mopping it up, are you able to clean up the water without turning off the water line? No, you're just going to continuously get water into that mop and fill up the bucket and throw it out the window and then keep doing it over and over and over as water is gushing out of this pipe. Same thing, if you're drowning and I throw you a life vest, is it going to support you? Yes. AKA these protocols are the life vest. They will support you. If I never pull you out of that water, you're never going to get out of it. There's no way out except out. You have to either fix the problem, remediate, or get out. You cannot heal from mold if you're living in mold. Mold is very dangerous, as we have come to learn. Foundations of healing from mold and mycotoxin. So number one, we have to support our drainage and detox pathways. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of different schools of thought and a lot of different theories. And I'm not here to tell you any one of them is right or wrong. I'm here to tell you my clinical experience and what I have seen to be true doing this for as long as I have. First and foremost, your body is designed to heal. Most people don't need extreme protocols. We're not forcing your body to get better. We are allowing the opportunity for your body to heal. Your body is designed to heal with the right support. So that means opening up drainage pathways, supporting your own detox mechanisms. I'm not going to throw you on a detox protocol and be like, here, take 10,000 supplements to force a detox. You detox naturally. That's how our bodies are designed. We have mechanisms in place for detox. If those have been sluggish or impaired, we need to support them. That's how we're going to start detoxing. We also need to make sure we are having bowel elimination. You need to be sweating. Sweating is one of the best ways to get mycotoxins out of the body. You need to be having routine bowel movements. If you are not pooping, you are not detoxing. And you need to be focusing on deep breathing. We'll talk more about that in our nervous system piece. We're going to increase antioxidants, liver support, and consider binders. We are going to consider potential diet restrictions only in extreme cases, like I mentioned previously. And then we are going to work on our nervous system. As you could see, I said nervous system, nervous system, nervous system. That is, if I can impart one thing onto you from this course, is your nervous system has to be on board. If your brain is not on board, you are not going to heal. Healing will be an uphill battle. You will see other people like this, whether you're in Facebook support groups or your friends, or maybe this is you yourself. All of these people that you know, they've seen the best practitioners and they've been put on amazing protocols and they get better, but you don't. You've seen 1,000 practitioners. You've tried 100 different protocols. You've done it all and nothing is working. It's your nervous system. I cannot stress that enough. And I know that if you are this person that's dysregulated, this is going to be triggering information. I know that I was there as a patient, and now as a clinician, I could tell you, if you don't like me saying this to you, it's because we need to work on your nervous system. If your brain is not on board, we're not going to be healing. It's going to be so hard to heal. Key antioxidants. There are so many antioxidants. I mean, throw a rock in a supplement store, you'll hit an antioxidant, right? So many, but these are the ones I like to focus on for mycotoxin and mold illness. First and foremost, we have our glutathione. Glutathione is our master antioxidant. I'm sure you've heard that term. It's very well known. It is going to directly support the mycotoxin in phase 2 of liver detoxification. It's going to neutralize the free radicals created in phase 1. We're going to talk all about this coming up. Also, glutathione is quickly depleted, especially in mold-exposed individuals, so you really want to support your glutathione levels. NAC is a great antioxidant. It boosts intracellular glutathione in certain cases. We're going to talk about that soon. It also reduces mucus. So if you have mucus, phlegm, congestion, NAC is your natural mucinex. It's going to help dry up excess mucus. Alpha-lipoic acid is going to support liver repair, mitochondrial function. Vitamin C is one of my favorite forms of an antioxidant. It's going to help reduce oxidative stress and inflammation, help recycle that glutathione, and it's going to help buffer some detox reactions and histamine flares because it's going to stabilize those mast cells. Selenium is really great. It's essential also for glutathione recycling and protective against oxidative stress. I want to talk a little bit about oxidative stress. I've mentioned this now a few times. I want you to think of oxidative stress as fires, little fires in your body. And antioxidants are the fire extinguishers. So they're going to go ahead and put out all those little fires. Now, glutathione is like the hose from the fire department, right? It's going to blast. I mean, it is so strong and it's so powerful and so incredible. We love it. However, it's not something that could be used over and over. It's going to be used a few times and then your body's going to be done with it. PQQ, on the other hand, it's very, very, very potent. It's going to stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis. It's useful in energy depleted and neuroinflammatory cases, and it's very synergistic with CoQ10. CoQ10, another antioxidant, you might have heard of it, for heart protection, brain health, and energy production. Quercetin is another one, it's a mast cell stabilizer. We talked about this in the histamine slides. Quercetin is phenomenal for mold-triggered histamine issues. It's a great antioxidant support for that as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the liver, because I know we just keep mentioning liver detox over and over and over. And if you're not science-based, skim over this stuff, right? But for the people that really want to understand how the liver plays a role in detox, this is going to be for you. The liver has two very specific phases to process toxins, including mycotoxins, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is our activation. So toxins are chemically modified into intermediate forms, which actually makes them more toxic. It's very fascinating. These intermediates are more reactive than the original substance, right? It generates free radicals, it causes inflammation, especially if we have an imbalance to antioxidants. The goal is to make these toxins ready for excretion so they become more dangerous temporarily. Phase 2, which we call conjugation, this is our neutralization and elimination phase. The body binds phase 1 byproducts to molecules that make them water soluble, so then you can safely excrete them out via urine, bile, or stool. There are several pathways to how this happens, but ultimately the goal is to turn reactive compounds into harmless, excretable forms to get them out of the body. There are certain nutrients that support phase 1 and certain nutrients that support phase 2. And you want to make sure you're getting a variety of nutrients to make sure that we are balanced. We don't have too much supporting phase 1, but not enough supporting in phase 2. Phase 1 supporters are going to be vitamin B, specifically B2, 3, 6, 9, and 12. Vitamin C, magnesium, zinc, and antioxidants. Remember, we said it's going to get more toxic before it gets better. Those antioxidants are going to help buffer that toxicity. Supportive foods are going to be citrus, super high in vitamin C, green tea, high in polyphenols, which I'm sure you've heard is going to be so supportive for many things. They're anti-aging, they help against oxidative stress and damage. Cruciferous vegetables, which many people have heard is really good for detoxification. This is why. Turmeric, garlic, onions, carrots, beets, and berries. Phase 2, our key nutrients, we've got our glutathione, we've got our sulfur compounds, methyl donors like B6, 12, and folate, magnesium, and amino acids like taurine, glycine, and glutamine, and then our calcium diglucarate. Supportive foods are going to be sulfur-rich foods, so think of like eggs, garlic, onion, cruciferous, leafy greens, avocados, beets, legumes, Brazil nuts, and fermented foods if tolerated. If you have histamine issues, it may not be tolerated, but give it time. We're working on root cause here, right? Let's talk a little bit about glutathione and detox. This is a very simple overview. As we mentioned before, glutathione is the body's master antioxidant. It's made from glutamine, cysteine, and glycine. It supports detox pathways and reduces oxidative stress. The liver detox phases, as we know, phase 1, we're going to take toxins activated by the liver enzymes. It's going to get more reactive before it gets better. In phase 2 is conjugation. Glutathione binds to these intermediates for safe excretion. So glutathione is really important for that phase 2 to help bind out some of this stuff. Glutathione neutralizes free radicals from phase 1, which we just mentioned. It's going to conjugate to those mycotoxins to get them out. It's going to support mitochondrial production and energy. Without enough glutathione, we can get stuck with our detox. Symptoms can flare. In a snapshot, we've got our mycotoxins. We neutralize them. They become water soluble, excreted out via bile and urine. Glutathione is important in that process. As we know, mold is a living organism which can colonize in the gut, sinuses, and lungs, and then mycotoxins are the non-living toxic chemicals produced by some molds. Antifungals target colonized mold. So when people go on like strong antifungals, it's really to specifically get the colonized mold. Colonized mold killers would be nystatin. That's a really popular one. That's a prescription. You can also do botanicals like oregano oil, berberine, caprylic acid, and pau d'arco. These kill the colonized mold, not the mycotoxins. Mycotoxins can't be killed. They have to be neutralized. Glutathione, phase 2 detox, right? Remember? Binds and reacts with mycotoxins in the liver. It's one of our go-tos for getting mycotoxins out of the body is going to be our glutathione. Binders, there's many different binders. We'll get into which ones do what. Trap them. They trap the mycotoxins in the gut. They bind to them. And then the antioxidants like vitamin C, NAC, selenium, PQQ, we talked a lot about that, support detox, removes the negative effects and the damage from the mycotoxin. So it helps with that oxidative stress that occurs with some of these ill effects of mycotoxins. I get this question all the time. Can I take NAC instead of glutathione? Or I don't need glutathione because I'm on NAC and NAC is going to turn into glutathione. Maybe, but maybe not. NAC is a precursor for glutathione. That is true. NAC is like the raw material and glutathione is like the finished byproduct that your body actually uses in detox. NAC, it gives your body cysteine, which is a very difficult amino acid to get, for building glutathione. It helps reduce oxidative stress on its own. It's a great antioxidant, but it does not bind to mycotoxins directly or perform phase 2 conjugation like glutathione does. NAC helps your body make glutathione, but this is the but, you have to have glycine and glutamine, the other two building blocks. If you don't have those, you're not converting that into glutathione. So B2, B6, and selenium, they're also enzyme cofactors to complete this conversion. If you're deficient in those, you're not getting that finished byproduct of glutathione. Optimal liver functionality and low inflammation, which many mold-sensitive patients or individuals don't have to begin with, is going to prevent that NAC from turning into glutathione. So think of it like this. NAC are the bricks and glutathione's the house. So if you are in a fire, do you want someone dropping off bricks to rebuild your house, or you want someone to like roll up with the new house that you can move into, right? Like, not really the time to be doing your own brick work, in my opinion. Let's just get on some glutathione if tolerated and use NAC as an antioxidant support in your mind to help with the oxidative stress, not because in your mind it's going to convert into glutathione. This next chart is from Vibrant Wellness, phenomenal lab company, and it is a specific binding agent chart. So on the left-hand side, you'll see all of the different mycotoxins that this specific lab tests for, and then on the top are all the different binders. So when people say, oh, cholestyramine is the best binder and it's only a prescription and you have to find a doctor to prescribe it, otherwise you're not going to get better. Well, let's look at cholestyramine. It doesn't bind out much. It's binding out some ochratoxin A, some mycophenolics, some a couple others, but it's not binding out gliotox. It's not binding out citrinin. It's not binding out aflatoxin. It's not binding out many of the big players. So you really need to be on a multi-binder or just cross-reference this sheet. You have your test results, figure out what's going to work. I am impartial to a multi-binder. GI Detox is my go-to. GI Detox has activated charcoal, which surprisingly is a pretty effective binder. It's got clay, it's got pectin. I believe it has fulvic acid in there. So it's going to bind a lot of different things. It's like an all-purpose binder, but you can go through this list and figure out what works and what doesn't. You know, some clays are really effective, as you could see. When people tell you they're only taking fulvic acid because fulvic acid's the best binder, I want you to pull up this chart and say fulvic acid pulls out one mycotoxin. One. It's not the best binder. You really need to have a comprehensive approach. I also want you to realize that fiber is our natural binder in the body. Fiber is so good at binding. It actually, there's studies that show fiber even binds out PFAS, which is like the forever chemical that comes from plastic, right? So fibers are really important and can be a part of your healing protocol from mycotoxin and mold illness. You can reference this chart though for more details. Let's talk a little bit about minerals and detox pathways. So specific minerals, specifically zinc, magnesium, selenium, and manganese are essential in phase 1 and phase 2 of liver detoxification, mitochondrial function, antioxidant defenses. Some binders may not only bind to the toxins, but they can also bind to minerals, which means you could potentially be pulling yourself into a deficiency, especially if you were teetering on that. Don't forget, when we are super stressed, we burn through specific things very quickly. B's, magnesium, minerals, we're burning through that very fast. So we have to be cognizant to replace them and or not do things that are going to deplete them further. So if you go on a binder and you feel so much worse, fatigue, headaches, muscle cramps, Herx reactions, die-off reactions, it might just be that you have become mineral deficient and we need to support you with a little bit of trace minerals. Mineral status obviously affects everyone differently, depends on how many minerals you had to begin. Let's talk constipation on protocols. If you are constipated, you're not detoxing. If you are not pooping, you are not detoxing. You have to have regular bowel movements. If you need support, let's get support. That's fine. I just don't want it to be a habit-forming bowel stimulant. So things that you could do, there's a product called SIBO MMC by Priority One. It's going to help with increasing intestinal motility. Then you have Motility Pro by Orthomoleculars. Same thing, increases intestinal motility. Pooper by BioRay. It's a great supplement. It's herbal and it's kid-friendly. Very young children can take it, like I think even less than 1 year old. Oxy powder by Global Healing is essentially mag oxide. It's a bowel flush. It's just going to flush it out without being stimulating. Additional things we could do to support our liver through this whole process. Milk thistle, we know that milk thistle is a liver cell protector. It shields the liver from mycotoxin damage. It helps support the production of glutathione. It's going to aid in the elimination of specific toxins and mycotoxins. It helps regenerate liver tissue. Milk thistle is pretty incredible. You can easily add that into a protocol if tolerated. My school of thought is do 1 bottle and then pause it. We don't just stay on something forever and ever and ever. That supplement should be supplemental, right? They're not a forever thing. Bitter foods are really supportive for the liver and the bile. You could increase bitter foods like arugula, asparagus, bitter greens. Think of like turnip greens, mustard greens, collard greens. Or you can get a bitter spray. So Better Bitters by Herb Farm is a spray that you could hold into your mouth for 30 to 60 seconds before swallowing. Incredibly bitter. It's going to help with liver and bile production. We also have additional pathway support in the form of dry brushing. You can go get a lymphatic drainage massage. You could do some gua sha, myofascial release therapies, which you could seek out on your own. Castor oil packs, we'll talk more about that. And I will also have a castor oil PDF available in the course resources. And then sweating, we did touch on that briefly. Sweating is going to be incredibly important, and we'll touch on that again. Castor oil packs for mycotoxin detox support. Castor oil supports lymphatic flow. So it's really, really important to help with your lymphatic system when we're in the process of detox, because as our liver gets stagnated, it can back up into our lymphs. Think of the lymphs as like the sewage system. And it's very important for detox, but it does not have its own pumping mechanism, right? So like the intestines has its own mechanism of pumping, that peristalsis to get things out, the intestinal motility to get things out. But the lymphatic system doesn't have that. It depends on your movement. People that are moving and doing natural movement, so think about how we used to live, where we are out picking herbs and gardening and working out our body in different motions, that's going to help essentially be the pump for the lymphatic system. Yoga is going to be good. Working out at the gym is going to be good. You got to move your body. If you're not moving your body is stagnant, and a stagnant body is not a healthy body. It's a body that can get toxic very quickly. Better lymph flow, better immune response, better ability to clear toxins. Castor oil packs are believed to reduce inflammation in the liver, improve bile flow, support parasympathetic activation, calms the nervous system, aids in rest and digest. And there is a small study that shows that it actually increases lymphocyte production, suggesting immune modulation. That study was done in mice, and I could not find one done in humans, but it's an interesting study nonetheless. Castor oil packs also can support bowel regularity. A lot of people experience a bowel flush after a castor oil pack. So you could do a castor oil pack over your stomach, which will get your intestines as well. You could do it over your liver, and sometimes that will help get a stimulated bowel movement. This matters because mycotoxins can be reabsorbed via enterohepatic recirculation, a process where substances like bile acids, bilirubin, and certain drugs that are excreted from the liver into the bile then travel into the intestines and then can be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream and then transported back to the liver. It's like this loop that can happen instead of being excreted out through the bowel movement. So long story short, you have to poop. I know I've said it 10 times. You've got to have regular bowel movements. And if you don't, let's do some supported aids like we mentioned previously. The more regular your elimination is, within reason, fewer circulating toxins. Nervous system regulation is also a side effect of castor oil packs. They tend to be very calming. They could stimulate the vagus nerve, which helps bring that body back into rest and digest, which is essential for healing. You are not healing if you are stuck in fight or flight, and we're going to talk about this more soon. Protocol is broken down into two predominant phases, right? Phase one is address the mold and the mycotoxins. We cannot heal from mold if we're living in mold. We did talk about that. We can do supportive protocols if we're living in mold. That's like that life jacket analogy, right? If you're drowning, I could throw you a life jacket and it's going to help. It's not going to pull you out of the water though. Some people leave the moldy environment and their body can do it on their own. They don't need additional support. And like we mentioned before, everyone's genetically different. Everyone's nervous system is different. Everyone's toxin load is different. Everyone's ability to heal happens at a different rate. Other people need support. And if you need support, on average, what I see is most people need 6 to 12 weeks of protocols. Phase two is going to be supporting mitochondrial and cell wall repair. So once we've already addressed the mold and mycotoxins, both internally and in the environment, we sometimes need mitochondrial support. So if you were still feeling like brain foggy, lethargic, low energy, your little mitochondria just might need a boost. And that's because mitochondria take a big hit with mold and mycotoxin illness. What you could do is 1 bottle of Mito Energy or Mito Core at the end of your phase one protocols and add in some optimal PC by Seeking Health. That's going to help repair the cell wall and also restore and provide the nutrients to help support the mitochondria inside the cell. Let's get into protocols. I want to preface this with this is educational only. I don't know you or your medical condition or what medications you're on or what allergies you have, so I can't be your provider through this course. Of course, you can make an appointment with me and then we can have a patient-provider relationship, but I don't recommend the self-management of health concerns. So this is my disclaimer. This is very educational. And you could take this education and you could do what you will with that. But I cannot tell you what supplement to take, at what dose to take, for how long. I could just give you what I see clinically. And I will give you some of that information, but that's not because it's a recommendation for you. It's because this is an educational program so you could start to wrap your head around what things look like. Okay, with that being said, step one is obviously we got to find the molds. We found it, we remediated it, we moved out of it, we're no longer in it, right? So this is beyond the testing. We've already have our answer. We know it's mycotoxins. Now we need to heal because we have not been able to have healing despite leaving the environment, or this is your life vest protocol per se, right? Educational. Step one is nervous system regulation. You can't heal if your brain's not on board. We're going to get into what that looks like soon. We're also going to start doing sauna. If you can tolerate heat, sauna is going to be your best friend because we can literally detox mold through sweat and we can detox mycotoxins through sweat. The way that we know if we could tolerate heat is we're going to go low and slow. Low heat, reduced amount of time. If we feel neutral or good after our sauna session, then you could tolerate it. And then you're going to work up to max heat up to 25 minutes a session. If you start feeling depleted, exhausted, wiped out, too much too fast. This is called sweat training. We just slowly increase it until we get to max heat 25 minutes. With that achievement, we then do sauna 4 times a week for 6 weeks. So it might take you a while to get there. We also have people that just can't detox, right? They're not able to sweat. That's a problem. That's not a good thing. When people say, oh, I don't sweat, that's a sign that we have impaired detox pathways. And if that's the case for you, once we get what's called an active rolling sweat, we are dripping in sweat. That's when that sauna countdown begins, 4 times a week for 6 weeks, once that active rolling sweat has been achieved. If you cannot tolerate heat, and a lot of mycotoxin mold illness patients can't, mycotoxin and mold illness can be an underlying factor to POTS. People with POTS don't tolerate heat well. So we're going to do this as we're able to. If you're not able to do it, then obviously we're going to skip it. And that's going to be a long-term goal for us. And long-term might be a year from now, it might be 6 months from now, it might be a month from now. Everyone's healing journey is very different. If we are able to do it and we are sweating, we want to replenish with an electrolyte because we need to make sure that we are not sweating out all of our nutrition and all of our minerals and all of our electrolytes, which are important for detoxification. Optimal electrolyte by Seeking Health is one of my favorite ones, so you can definitely get that online. Glutathione capsules or liposomal glutathione by Seeking Health, that's another great option. I like liposomal glutathione by Quicksilver. We will be adding that into our protocol as well. So now we have nervous system, we're starting to sweat to get that mycotoxin, those mycotoxins out. We're adding in our glutathione, and we're going to start with a binder. Like I said, GI Detox is my favorite binder because it is a multi-binder. It's going to bind out a little bit of everything. You can go back to that chart and you could figure out what binders may or may not work for you. Vitamin C is the antioxidant that I really like, but you should and can cycle them through. So you'll do vitamin C on a pulse method, meaning a few times a week, and then you could cycle through. So we could do PQQ on Monday, vitamin C on Wednesday, and maybe some CoQ10 on Friday. Cycle your antioxidants, right? We could do some rebounding. Rebounding is like a light bouncing on a trampoline. It's going to help kind of shake the mycotoxins out of our tissues, help mobilize them. We can be doing castor oil packs like we mentioned. And then of course, if we are not pooping, we are recirculating toxins. Make sure you're pooping. Most patients, like I said, 6 to 12 weeks, or most people I have seen, 6 to 12 weeks of this type of protocol has been sufficient for them. There are always cases where that's not the case, and I would argue that they really need to focus on nervous system regulation at that point. Pediatric protocols, and this is truly educational. This is not me telling you to put your child on this protocol. This is information that you could take to your child's pediatric provider. We want them to sweat. So kids love to run around outside, play on the playground, go play tag with their friends, go put them in soccer, get them sweating. You can help rehydrate them with a kid-friendly electrolyte. There is a company called Joy Spring. They make a product called GlutaGuard. It's safe for kids 2+. It is glutathione for little ones. Seeking Health's optimal chewable glutathione is safe for kids 4+. So some good options there in terms of pediatric glutathione. DHIS Junior is a great way to get antioxidant support. It's got NAC, bromelain, quercetin, vitamin C. This is safe for kids 10+ years old. Global Healing Vitamin C, you can give that to little ones. Also, Earthly makes a food-based vitamin C that you can give to infants that I really like. GI Detox is a binder. Start with a microdose, a quarter capsule. This is not safe for toddlers, so you really do need to be working with a provider to make sure that they are on a protocol that is safe for them. You can't just be willy-nilly putting your kids on anything, right? This is something that I heard from a colleague once, and I really loved this. Children and toddlers are not little humans in terms of how their body works. They're not just like a petite version. So, sometimes a medication will say like, if you're 60 to 70 pounds, this is the dose. Well, a child might be 60 pounds, but it might not be safe for them. So even though they're of the same weight, it might not be safe for them. They're not mini versions of adults. They really need their own special consideration when it comes to medication and dosing. Castor oil packs, great for kids. We don't have to do a whole setup, right? You'll see the PDF on castor oil and how there are many options to apply castor oil. But for infants, slather them in some castor oil, put them in an old t-shirt that can get stained and let them go run around outside, let them go to sleep with it. That's fine. You don't need to do a whole get up with the castor oil. Castor oil over the liver is great. If we've got some congestion, castor oil on the back where the lungs are, that's great too. Additional support, like we talked about, minerals are really important. So we can use something called trace minerals. We can use concentrates minerals by the company Trace Minerals. They have specific dosing for kids. BioRay products, phenomenal for kids. They have an entire pediatric line, helps with detoxification depending on the product. They have some for mood regulation. Sometimes mood is because they're detoxing and they're not able to handle the Herx reactions, the die-off symptoms. So BioRay does a really great job with their product lines to help support some of these big issues like mood and detox. Like I mentioned, always work with the provider. This is not me putting together a protocol for your child. This is educational information that you could share with your pediatric provider so they can help determine a protocol, or you could schedule an appointment. We're finally getting into nervous system, and this is, like I said, the most important thing when it comes to mold mycotoxin illness, as well as other immune modulating conditions, autoimmune conditions, Lyme disease. If we are not working on our nervous system, healing is very difficult. Mold and mycotoxins can trigger neuroinflammation. They could disrupt the autonomic balance of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, cause anxiety, sleep issues, fatigue. We talked about a lot of these symptoms. And they can cross the blood-brain barrier as well. Chronic exposure can disrupt the HPA axis, the stress hormone response system. Scientific studies have suggested that mycotoxins can be neurotoxic, as we saw in that sample report, which ones were shown to be neurotoxic. They can cause oxidative stress, inflammation, immune dysregulation, and compound stress on the nervous system. How the nervous system gets dysregulated, this is the million-dollar question. There can be an initial trigger, like mold or mycotoxins, but typically what happens is mold and mycotoxins is the straw that broke the camel's back. Usually these people have had a lot of other things stacking up on their immune system, and this is the trigger. What are some of those other things? Emotional trauma, extreme stress, a poor work-life balance, dysfunctional relationships, relationships that have inappropriate boundaries. So they're already constantly in fight or flight, right? Sometimes what happens is past the stage of fight or flight is numbness. And I've seen this a lot where people already say, oh, how's your stress level? And they say, I don't think I'm stressed. It's because they're so numb, they don't feel anything. And so as we get them more regulated, they then start backtracking and they start feeling all those suppressed emotions, and then they start to feel better. It's kind of like a ladder. What essentially happens is you have that initial threat or the straw that broke the camel's back, which in this case might be mold, right? The body perceives the threat. We go into this fight or flight. We have a chronic stress response of cortisol, neuroepinephrine, and inflammatory cytokines. The brain stays on alert. It's now misinterpreting neutral stimuli as danger, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the next slide. It then triggers more stress, which keeps us in this hyper-vigilant state. It's a cycle, and then it continues to go back into this feedback loop. This all makes sense on the next slide. So you can see number one, initial trigger. Maybe it's the mold exposure, maybe it's the mycotoxin exposure, maybe it's something else. Number two, our body perceives that threat. So we go into this sympathetic dominance fight or flight stage. Step three is our stress response kicks in, cortisol, neuroepinephrine, inflammatory cytokines. Step four, our brain stays on high alert. It misinterprets neutral stimuli. So what does that mean? This often means patients had a mold exposure, their body is freaking out, high stress response, they're managing it, their body's in overgear, and then they get out of the mold and they walk into a house, for example, and they're like, oh my gosh, I smell mold, I think there's mold, and they immediately react, even if there's no mold. So when this step four says brain stays on alert, misinterprets neutral stimuli, it means a thought can literally trigger a systemic response. Your body is on high alert and it is just being hypervigilant and being overactive. Instead of looking at something and being like, that might be a threat, but probably not, your body's looking at that and like, that is a threat, we need to respond immediately. It's that extreme level of hypervigilance. What does nervous system dysregulation feel like? It feels like a heightened sense of hypervigilance. So you're always on, you're always looking for danger, you're just constantly heightened. We could have sensitivity issues to sound, to light, to noise, to smells, difficulty staying calm, feeling like we're always keyed up, mood swings, anxiety, panic, emotional dysregulation, or emotional numbness, difficulty focusing or feeling grounded, like we're just here, there, and everywhere, but not here, not centered, not within our body. These symptoms reflect an overactive sympathetic state, aka fight or flight, and a hypoactive parasympathetic state, aka rest and digest. If you are in that overactive sympathetic state, you are not going to be healing easily. It's going to be an uphill battle. What do we do about this? Great question. We have two programs I really like. One is called DNRS. The other one's called Primal Trust. DNRS is a limbic retraining program. They both work on rewiring the nervous system. DNRS was created by Annie Hopper. It's based on principles of neuroplasticity and limbic rewiring. It uses structured daily brain retraining routines that looks like visualizations, affirmations, redirecting symptoms, emphasizing avoiding negative input, and reinforcing safety pathways. often best for beginners. I personally did this. So when I mentioned to you I had anaphylaxis and I was going through a very challenging time from mold illness, DNRS was the program that I did, and it was incredibly powerful. Does it feel hyper simplistic? Yes. Does it feel like there's no way this is going to work? 1000%. I did it because I had no choice. It was like my Hail Mary, and it was life-changing for me and for many, many patients with mold, Lyme, POTS. Primal Trust is a newer program created by Dr. Kathleen King. She is also DNRS trained. So she has a training in DNRS, combines neuroplasticity with somatics, attachment repair, vagus nerve activation, trauma-informed tools, and really focuses on education, having your body understand what's happening, and then teaching your body how to get out of it. It embodies self-attunement. Within that program, it's going to teach you meditations. There's a strong sense of community and many tools to address the nervous system dysregulation. So one tool might be really successful for me, but not at all for you. So there's like dozens of tools. You can go through them, learn them, and then figure out which one your body feels best with, and then just practice that one on a regular basis. Tools to support nervous system recovery, like we mentioned, Primal Trust, DNRS, EFT tapping, which I'm going to include in the course handouts and the course resources, a PDF on this. Vipassana meditation, it's a style of meditation that you can learn to do. Be here now practices, so mindful practices that really help you get back into your body, help you feel your body, because when we are in this hyper vigilant state, we're not grounded at all. Vagus nerve support like gargling, humming, and breath work. These methods work by calming the nervous system and vagus nerve, and they are key players in chronic stress. And pairing these with physical detox support protocols, it's A+ for healing. But like I said, if your brain's not on board, the healing's not going to happen. And you're really going to just go leaps and bounds if you can get your nervous system in check to begin with. What does the research say on all of this? We know chronic inflammation affects the central and autonomic nervous system. That is scientifically validated. We know that vagus nerve stimulation shows some pretty good evidence at reducing inflammatory responses. Neuroplasticity programs are relatively anecdotal. I would argue that they just have not been studied enough because there are literally tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of patients with the same exact story of how these programs have changed their lives. Mindfulness and breath work also have been shown to improve the stress response, and that's going to help with your nervous system. Okay, so bonus videos moving forward. We are going to be interviewing Brantley with EnviroHealth. He is one of the top inspectors in the Southeast region. He's going to sit with us and discuss things like air sampling, the pros and cons, thermal imaging, and more. That's going to give us a really good insight on the inspection side of things. And then I will have in our course documents a protecting your home sheet, kind of like a checklist, things that you need to be doing on the regular. Do we have, plastic mats under all of our sinks to catch any potential leak that is bound to happen at some point? Are we regrouting our showers and resealing our showers, things like that. Okay, so our closing note from our course of feeling overwhelmed to regulated, we have learned how mold and mycotoxins impact the body and nervous system, how to test for exposure, the critical role of detox pathways, binders, antioxidants, nervous system regulation, and that healing is not about doing more. It's about supporting the body's own intelligence and innate design to heal. You are capable of healing. That is the takeaway from this course. And you're not going to just throw 30 supplements at your body and think that you're doing it a favor. Sometimes less is more, and it's really about breaking things down and understanding detox pathways, how to support those detox pathways, what key nutrients are big time players to really promote wellness moving forward. Remember that detox is not a sprint, it's a recalibration. Your body is not broken, it is responding. And when you support the right systems, healing really does follow. The next steps, we're going to begin applying the foundations, bowel movements, binders, liver support, antioxidants, and we're going to be prioritizing the nervous system. If your brain is not on board, healing is just an uphill battle. Your body is working for you, not against you, and symptoms are its way of asking for help. So this is not a sign of your body failing, your body sabotaging you. This is an invitation for you to listen so you can move forward with optimal health. So I just want to say a big thank you for taking this course. I hope that this information was valuable to you. I hope that you feel so much more empowered on how to manage all of these symptoms and your mycotoxin exposures with ease moving forward.